Welcome back to the Automation Podcast. My name is Shawn Tierney from Insights in Automation. And in this episode, I sit down with Eric Eckman from Paessler to learn all about what's new with their product lines, including what's new on the OT side of their product lines. Now, before we get into that, I want to thank Paessler for sponsoring this episode so I can release it to you completely ad-free. And when vendors come on and sponsor these episodes, it underwrites our cost to produce them. And so I really appreciate it. So if any of you reach out to Paessler, please thank them for sponsoring this episode of the Automation Podcast. I also want to thank all our members. If you don't know, I released 2 member-only videos about my trip to Automate over on both YouTube and theautomationblog.com. So if you're a member and you haven't checked those out, please do. And I got a bunch of new stuff coming for members this year. So if you're interested in becoming a member, you'll find more over at theautomationblog.com/join. And with that said, let's jump into this week's episode with Eric Eckman from Paessler to learn all about their IT and OT product line. Eric, welcome to the Automation Podcast. I'm really glad you could come on to bring us up to speed on Paessler and what you guys are doing. But before we start jumping into all that content, can you first introduce yourself to our audience? Because I know you're fairly new with Paessler. And then tell us, just for those audience members who may not have caught the last episode where we talked to your company, maybe give them an introduction to the company a little bit, and then tell us what we want to really do a deep dive on is on the OT side stuff. So let me just turn it over to you. Give us an introduction. Tell us who you are.
Sounds good. Thank you, Shawn. Appreciate the chance to get on here and talk with you and your audience. Yeah, the OT stuff is where the fun is, but we'll get to that. I guess by way of my history, I've been selling technology for longer than I even want to admit. And in the last 15 years, it's been focused in industrial automation and OT, the OT world. So it's the through line from my, I guess, 3 positions in this space is uptime and availability for the plant floor. So I started with a company called Stratus that was since acquired by Penguin Solutions, and they have fault-tolerant computers that were deployed in control rooms or on the factory floor in a DIN rail or things like that. So it's an IT type product because it's a server, it's a fault-tolerant server. But the way we went to market and the way it was always deployed was in support of HMI and SCADA and historians and Thin Manager and all those plant floor applications. So that was basically my introduction to this world, and boy, it just grabbed me, and that's where I've been living ever since. It was a channel sales role, and so I got to work with a lot of different end customers, with system integrators, OEMs, electrical distributors, understanding this space and helping them to basically work with their customers to make sure that their production lines did not go down. From there, I ended up with a OT-focused cybersecurity firm that was relatively young and new, but they've got a really neat solution called ARIA Cybersecurity. And so we were going to market again, same use cases. Instead of now making sure that your servers don't go down, now we're going to make sure that your software doesn't get compromised. You know, whether that be from hackers or evil people with evil intent, or an IT guy that wants to do a Windows update in the middle of a production run. So same idea, right? Is keeping production running in a way that's easy for the OT and controls team to support. So subsequently, turns out that I learned of this company called Paessler that has been around for quite a while. I'll give you a little bit more on the company here in a moment, but they are focused on monitoring of all sorts of networks, devices, and applications. And they've been around for almost 30 years, focused on more of the IT world, where a lot of the network management and monitoring tools would typically exist. And come to find out that they have now doubled down. We've got some abilities that we'll talk about here as we go forward to really work in the OT world. And again, to extend my career path here, is focused on now raising the profile, because we're very well known in the IT space. We're not as well known in the OT space, but we have some really unique capabilities that we want to make sure that everybody understands. And so I was brought on board here in North America to grow their channel that is focused on the OT world and to raise the profile, of course, as well. So that's me. And then we can do more on the company if that makes sense too, whatever you think makes sense.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you going back and talking about your history. So you really understand OT. Like I've worked with Stratus before. We actually had him on the show many years ago. to talk about what they do, and that's a very OT focused. I mean, there are similar products in the IT world, but this was, really aimed at, you know, um, if you're not going to deploy the active moving VMs in a cluster and all this stuff, which is great technology, there was a nice simplicity about that. And then, you get into security, which we've had so many people on to talk about. It's so very important. But one of the things I liked about Pessler, and when, because we had him on previously, was that, a lot of times we need information about our industrial OT networks, right? And, companies will make like blocks and add-on instructions and these things where they can, but what Pessler has is a solution that was developed for IT and now is embracing the OT side as well, and it allows us to have like that industrial grade, IT monitoring on the OT side. So as long as our industrial switches and devices had certain features in them, they could plug right into the Pessler system, PRTG, well, the OPC system and all that. And I'll let you get into that. I don't want to mess that stuff up. But I know you guys are also working on some different technologies too to talk to PLCs and start monitoring them, which is so exciting. I mean, monitoring the PC your HMI or SCADA is running on, that's one thing, right? But if we can start monitoring PLCs as well and other smart devices on the plant floor, that just brings it to a whole nother level. So let me go ahead and turn it back to you. Maybe tell us a little bit about, you know, Pessler and how what their position is on IT side to help us understand what their core what their core expertise is in.
Sure, absolutely. So the company was founded almost 30 years ago, 1997, in Germany. And so we've got a large presence there, a lot of folks working out of our headquarters there. However, the United States is already our biggest market. So it's not like we're brand new to the States. So it's not like we're brand new to OT and industrial automation as well. But we've got over a 500,000 active users every day of our solution in almost 200 countries all over the world, almost 500 employees. So we're not three guys in a garage with a good idea. We're not new guys on the block. And very important to what you just described, Shawn. Um, I know that a lot of times I feel like the controls or the OT folks, when they hear we're coming from the IT space, they think, oh my gosh, they're gonna jam a tool that isn't appropriate for the OT world down my throat. And that's not what we're doing here. And you alluded to it a little bit, but and we'll get into it over time. But that was really important to me. You can't just put a new wrapper on something and say, okay, we're OT now. Swap out the I for an O, and all of a sudden it's a whole different thing, right? So we could talk about how we're really specifically focused on the challenges that are inherent in the OT side of the house.
Yeah, let's just take like a use case on the IT side though, so the audience
Sure,
understands that, right?
sure.
Why would somebody who has a very big IT network to monitor and maintain, why would they use your company? What are they getting from your company?
So there's a lot of tools that they would use, that are other options for monitoring of. We started out as monitoring networks, so bandwidth, throughput, ping, all that sort of thing, on switches and routers and firewalls for a network management tool, basically. And
Okay.
so that's where we've lived from the IT side of the house, going back again to the 1990s. Up to today. So we compete with some other very well-known companies in that space. The way we compete against those folks is ease of use. We are one of our taglines is monitoring in minutes. Many of the tools that do what we do take days, weeks, months to get them set up. You have to go get certified in some boot camp in order to manage it and monitor it. I literally just got off of a demo for one of our what's going to be one of our new partners in the OT space. And the gentleman had worked with one of the more popular brands, and he looked at our interface and he said, "Oh my gosh, this looks like I could just use this right out of the box." So we have that. We also have some pricing advantages. When we start talking about how we address the OT world, it's all in the box. So if you get a license for my stuff, you're going to get your IT stuff, you're going to get your OT stuff. There's not all these little nooks and crannies and additional charges and all that. So that's how we've competed in the marketplace. We really are more from a customer perspective, small teams, nimble teams, distributed teams. So My bread and butter customers are not necessarily the Fortune 20, although we've got an awful lot of use cases of those folks. But when we're talking about folks with reasonably small staffed or distributed enterprises, which of course in the industrial automation world, that's how most customers are. There's plenty of folks running single plants, and then there's midstream pipelines and oil and gas, and there's all these other various verticals where we play. Long answer to a short question. I specialize in that.
So let me ask you this. So I got the OT crowd, the controls engineers listening to this show. Um, let's start at the switch level. If they have some industrial network switches in there that are managed, right? What feature does it need to have? And I'm thinking simple network management protocol, but what feature does their managed switch or their industrial grade switch have to be able to plug into is it PRTG?
PRTG. Yes, I
Okay.
that was that was how I knew that they were going to keep me here as soon as I learned how to spell PRTG. Um, so as far as and I'm not going to go too technical on you here because I'm a more of a biz dev sales guy, but yes, SNMP is one of the main SSH. There's all these various protocols for the different devices from the IT, the legacy IT assets, and then of course a different set in some cases on the OT side. Let me bring out a distinction here, which is something that since I started my work with Stratus and introduced to manufacturing, industrial automation, et cetera, there was always ITOT, ITOT, and you hear all these sorts of things about convergence or challenges or whatever in regards to IT and OT. What I've come to understand now, and you might have been headed that way with your question about switches, is there's when I think of IT and OT, there's something else that I'm calling industrial IT, and I don't think I necessarily coined that phrase, but it's switches, routers, firewalls. It's things that are really devices that could be considered IT devices, but they're deployed now at level 2,
Mhm.
level 3 in your Purdue model, and all of a sudden now they're on your plant network. So it's an IT device, but it may be out of the purview of the IT team, and it's probably not managed. Well, it's not managed by your SCADA or your tools that are designed for the OT team. So in many cases, it's a blind spot, and that's kind of where I think we have some unique capabilities.
Yeah, and there's a lot of situations, at least in the plants I've been into, both in my current position, but also my 25 years working as a Rockwell certified distributor specialist. A lot of the facilities, the OT network is maintained by the OT. IT, you have it's not as serious, right? If it goes down for 5 minutes, no big deal. You go down in production for 5 minutes, that's a major issue. Not every plant, but in some plants, that's a major problem. And so the OT people have to manage, and a lot of them have to learn, the CLI interface, and they have to get in there, but no, most of them don't want to. They're experts at, writing code for controllers, creating screens for HMIs, setting up historians and analytical data. They don't want to have a second job, a second hat as, Mr. IT as well. And so for the OT side, so I think, they need and I think that's what, the OT initiative from your company is very helpful because like you said, your product's easier to deploy than some of the other IT tools that, I don't think anybody would want to touch with a 10-foot pole from the OT side. That said, one of the things I liked about how your product is sold is it's not sold specifically based on you have 5 switches, well, that's X amount of dollars, right? You actually have this term, and I'm hunting for it, but it's not a tag, but you have this term that talks about, what do you want to measure inside that switch? That's how we're going to, like, is there 100 variables you need to measure in that switch, or there's one or two? And
Yeah.
so can you explain how that works? It's not just like you have 100 switches, we're going to, charge you $100 million, right? So
Yeah.
can you explain that a little bit on how that works?
I will, and it's interesting because we actually so it's going to confuse everybody even more, which is wonderful. The term you're searching for is actually sensor, and so but it's not a hardware. It's not a device that is mounted on a piece of equipment. It's an actual software channel, if you can think of it. And it's funny because we actually go back the way you just did. We actually describe it almost like a tag because
Yeah.
that's very familiar terminology. But what we technically call it is a sensor, and so for a device, what we find on average Some devices you're going to have one sensor. Camera, for instance, you just want to make sure that it's alive, or maybe you're monitoring the feed, whatever the case may be. We found that 5 to 10 sensors per device is a good round number. Now,
Okay.
we also just had somebody talking about a 48 port switch. So there may be many more sensors because for each port, there might be multiple things you want to understand. You want to be ping or throughput or whatever the case may be. I'll get over my head technically, but there's a lot of different ways that you can enable, but you're just going to purchase for the number of sensors that you want. And we're very flexible on that. If we go over, it's not a hard cap. You're not going to get a screen that says, sorry, you only bought 500. This is 501. Things like that. We're very interested in making sure that it's easy to use. Monitoring in minutes is, again, one of our taglines. So we want to get it set up, discover the network, discover the devices that we need to monitor, and then enable you to turn on what are we monitoring and how are we doing it.
Hey guys, just want to jump in here in a minute and thank Paessler for sponsoring this episode so I can release it to you guys completely ad-free. If you guys talk to Paessler about any of their OT monitoring products, please don't forget to mention how much we appreciate them sponsoring this episode. Also should have a demo coming up using their product with some SCADA products here in the near future. That said, I also want to thank all our members who support the channel over on YouTube or theautomationblog.com. We got a bunch of new stuff coming up. Plus, I just released 2 videos about my trip to automate this year for you members. So check that out if you are a member. And if you want to learn more, please visit us over at theautomationblog.com/join. And with that, so let's jump right back into this week's episode of the Automation Podcast. Yeah, and so there could be instances in the field where, my PLC and its I/O, it's on a DLR ring, right? And there's really no managed switch on it. And I'm know that works. I'm very happy with it. But what I want to make sure is the PLC up to maybe my MES level or my historian SCADA level. I may want to monitor that, especially the ports that talk to the PLCs into the SCADA. Maybe not every port. There's utility ports all over the plant, right, for me to plug in my laptop. But that critical piece of equipment, that port, not all 48, but maybe 5 or 6 of those are critical. So those would be 5 or 6 sensors versus 48 sensors, right? And then there may be things inside the switch that I want to know about its overall CPU utilization and other things that, like a PLC, a switch has all these different variables you could monitor. And I thought what I thought was really cool is we can also do this on the computer level, right? So if I have a SCADA computer running, right? Maybe it's even a server box, maybe it's just a, desktop operating system. You have sensors for PCs, like for Windows operating systems, don't you?
Everything from the hypervisors, including Nutanix and Proxmox, and of course VMware and all those. So everything from that level to the operating systems to the applications, that's really the sweet spot for us. If you think about what our deployment model is in terms of industrial automation, which is where I'm spending my time, and of course why we're talking to you, this is we're going to gather the data from all the devices that you need, whether from the PLC itself, whether it's the computer that's connected to it, whether it's the network, and enable visibility that's role based. So the IT guys, if you're giving them a window into this, they're going to see one set of dashboards and one set of alarms that they might get, and then the OT or controls guys, we're going to give them alarms right in their SCADA, so we can hook it up via OPC so that they don't ever need to go to a different interface. They never need to look at my tool whatsoever. They might just they're looking at their Factory Talk View or their in Ignition or whatever, Aviva, and they're going to see an alarm that tells them, number one, is this something I need to deal with, or is this an IT issue, and vice versa, so that both sides of the equation, again, if you're saying IT and OT as 2 sides, they both get the specific information they need, not more, not less. There's no alarm fatigue or alert fatigue or none of that having to deal with constantly getting updates. It's very, very customized to what that person needs. And even at an OT level, maintenance person's going to be different than an engineer, and et cetera, plant manager, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, if I have several PCs out there that have HMI or SCADA system running on it, or maybe I got a redundant pair of SCADA servers serving up, 10 or 15 screens, there's a lot of information I may want to know about the health of those PCs. Right now, we just kind of do you know, cross our fingers, hope and pray. It's like it's working now. It should continue to work forever. But how much hard drive space is being used,
That's it.
right? What's the temperature? What's the temperature? Right? Because, it should be a happy 55 degrees or 50 degrees. And, if it's running 65, 70 degrees, that's way too hot for a PC in most instances. And so, those are things that you want to alarm on, right?
Yep.
In
Yep.
that we typically don't. We typically kind of just cross our fingers, hope it's working, right? And so I just thought that was so interesting. And now, before we talk about futures and what you guys are working on for in the coming months, let's talk about the OPC add-on, right?
Mhm.
What does that do for us having this? So if you bought Paessler and you installed it, you got all your sensors hooked up, you're getting all this data. The interface is really cool and easy to use, right?
Yeah.
What does the OPC add-on do for us?
Well, it depends which way you're going. So we can it either allows us to address and pull data off of devices that may not have another way to connect to them. And then the other use case that's super popular again that I already alluded to is, hey, I don't want to have to log into Paessler to the PRTG tool as a controls engineer. I just want to get an alarm. And that alarm could be an email, it could be SMS, it could be, whatever the case may be. But very often, again, what am I looking at all day long? I'm looking at a SCADA HMI. So give me an alarm there that is actually actionable. So it's not just, hey, something's going on. It's, hey, click on that button. And now it takes me to another interface that tells me much more granular data. And again, it depends on each organization how they implement that. Now, is the controls engineer or the maintenance or whoever the OT person is that gets that alarm in the HMI, is that something they need to deal with it? Or is it something they need to communicate to IT? Or has the IT guy also gotten an alert on this thing already and it wasn't in form of an OPC connection? It was in form of whatever the case may be, a Slack channel or some other tool that they might use. So again, it's extremely flexible, but it's based on whatever. Yet I went off topic from your OPC question, but that's essentially what we're talking about with OPC.
No, I can definitely want to see having those alarms come up on my skater or HMI. I
Yeah.
can definitely I don't see a lot of instances where you would need to know all the way down to the PLC, but there are some. Um, critical too for like camera applications. If the camera is, if it doesn't have the bandwidth, then the whole application doesn't work, right? So you need to know that
Yep.
information. But also, with our historians, right? It's also good. It would be good to have that information in the historian too. So if we're going back over time, we can see, oh, network very congested. No wonder communications has slowed down and we're not getting the throughput and the handing off of information from system to system. So I can see a lot of reasons for that,
We all,
for that OPC. Yep.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to step on you there. We also, we once over time, we're learning what normal is. And so we're also going to be able to alert you when this is not, typically on a Tuesday morning, we're not
Yep.
seeing this much traffic. Holy moly, something's going on your network right now that's out of the normal bandwidth or normal bands
Yeah.
of what you'd expect. And so those are sorts of things that are really helpful for folks because that we're not a cybersecurity tool, but we feed data that supports the cybersecurity posture for a company, and that's one of the tools that enables that. So,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I do this on a regular basis. So I have a high-end PC here, and whenever it gets slow, I'm like, this is an i9. It has tons of it's like I always open up Task Manager, and I'm like, okay, who's not behaving correctly?
Yes.
And
Yes.
um, and there's some culprits. I won't get into who they are, but bad code. But in any case, that's kind of where we're going. It's like, why? It's the old saying is like, if you don't, if a lot of troubleshooting is trying to find when the actual problem's happening, right? Because when you go to look at it afterwards, everything's behaving, and it's like, I don't know what's wrong with it because it's not acting up right now. And so having that historical data, like you said, is so helpful to see. All right, well, look at this port on the, whatever happened on the network. We're getting just a lot of traffic from the top down, and that traffic should not be there. And we'll have to maybe put some zero trust rules in there to make sure that that traffic doesn't propagate across our network. But no, I could
especially
definitely see that. Yeah.
especially for intermittent problems,
Yeah.
which many
Oh,
of them
absolutely.
are. Many,
Yep.
it's not just simply up or down very often. It's intermittent things. It's
Mhm.
something's acting funny. The controls guys are blaming the network. The IT guys are blaming the upgrade to the HMI. Whatever the case may be. And we're going to give you that. And this is an overused phrase, so I apologize. But the single source of truth that everybody can look at and say, here's what's happening, or here's what was happening historically as well. So that's important. Exactly.
Now, if you don't mind, I know you got some exciting stuff you guys are working on. Can you tell us a little bit? I know for different vendors, some might be out now, some might not be out. Our audience is interested in all the major vendors and the minor vendors too. So, can you tell us about some of the exciting things you guys are working on the OT side?
Let me start from a pure positioning. One of the neat things
Okay.
about what we do is that we are agnostic and we cover all the vendors. So you don't have to, a lot of the vendors have their own tools for monitoring their stuff, but they can't
Yeah.
address everybody else's stuff. Whereas we now
Yeah.
can come in and take care of everybody. Now, why are we here really focused on OT? We've got OPCUA, we talked about already. We've got MQTT. We've got Modbus. We now have our I think we've announced it. So we've got Siemens S7 that we are able to now natively address their protocols, and Ethernet IP is underway. And we're actually looking for feedback. That might be something that at the end of this, if people want to get in contact, we are really looking for more down and dirty, nitty gritty. What are devices? What are things that you want to monitor at this OT network that you're not able to get to? And so we are putting a lot of development effort to make sure that we can cover. It's already an advantage if you look at other monitoring tools. There's very few, I don't think anybody builds it in with your normal license. Almost everybody that tries to get to this space, you have an add-on that you have to purchase. Whereas you got my license, you get the whole soup to nuts, OT to IT thing, including all those protocols as well as all the obvious IT based ones. But anyway, that's a big focus for us, is addressing what are other blind spots that would be helpful to be able to get access to before something goes wrong. So we can set some thresholds, we can set some values that if something happens at this state, somebody needs to know about it.
Yeah, so we're thinking, we got our big three networks. We got Modbus TCP, we got Profinet, we got Ethernet IP. Those are the ones from all the charts and all the independent folks, that's what they say the big three are. There's some others that are close, in the rankings, fourth, five, and six. But so having all those is huge, right? And then, in the controllers themselves is these pieces of information I think that would be helpful, like how much memory is left in the controller, right? And I know we can go into with the development too, whether it's Studio 5000 or TIA Portal or um, Machine Expert or whatever the tool is we're using, CodeSys, and we can go in and see that. But man, it would be nice to have that, coming out with all the other, data with all the other sensors, right? The PRTG sensors, and have that alongside of it. So I just want to invite the audience, if you want to, and I'll put Eric's information up right now as we're talking, and also put it in the description. Send me your feedback. What are the parameters you like to measure? I mean, we talked about your switches, we talked about your PCs. We're now talking about your, industrial Ethernet. Is there anything else that would be critical for your facility? I want to get you directly in touch with Eric because you are the guys who have a need for this. I just have a training room with eight PCs in it, well, 20 or 30 PLCs, but
That's pretty
you
good.
guys are the guys who have the plants with the hundreds and thousands of PLCs out there, and you know what you need. So anything else that we should add to that, Eric, as far as what information you'd like to get from them?
No, that's the biggest thing we're looking for right now, is just feedback on what are more blind spots. That's our goal, is to eliminate the blind spots. So more blind spots that we can and illuminate and bring to bear. That's what we're looking for. We actually it's a normal course of business for us. Quite frankly, we've developed some custom forms for people to fill out if they're interested, and we actually compensate you with a $25 gift card if you spend a few minutes. But we have a voice of the customer that is built into our website as well. So this is
Nice.
something that's not just made up, because some marketing consultant told us we needed to do it. This is part of the heritage of the company, which is a wonderful thing for somebody who's relatively new here.
Excellent. Well, Eric, I want to thank you for coming on. Was there anything else you wanted to say before we close out the show?
I think we covered all the most important things, Shawn. I'm hopeful that I hear from some of the folks in the audience. I'd love more feedback. And again, I appreciate the chance to talk to you and the rest of the folks that are listening.
Yeah, and guys, if you want to get a demo of the latest version, you don't have to rely on that. I think it's maybe 2 years old the last time we had them on. Give them contact them, get a demo, ask questions. That's what they do.
You
And
got it.
Eric, again, I want to thank you for coming on the show and bringing us up to speed on what's going on.
Thank you, Shawn. It was great to be here.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I want to thank Eric for coming on the show and bringing us up to speed on Paessler's OT monitoring solution. We're going to have more information on it coming in the future, so stay tuned. I also want to thank all our members who support the channel with $5 or more a month by being a member at YouTube or theautomationblog.com. So thank you guys. Don't forget, I think we're up to 9 or 10 different member-only episodes this year so far, so we're on a roll, and they're going to keep on coming too. So with that said, if you're not a member, you can find out more over at theautomationblog.com/join. And finally, I just want to thank all of you for tuning in this week. I want to wish you all good health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.